Good morning, friend. I am T.C. Hoyer, Assistant Professor and Head, Department of English, late Pushpa Devi Patil, Arts and Science College, Risod, East Wasi. Today, we are going to learn a poem that is Ode on a Grecian Urn, written by John Keats. John Keats, a romantic poet who born on 31st October 1795 and died in 23rd February 1821. He is one of the main figure in second generation of romantic period. Other important poets in the second generation are P.B. Shelley and Lord Byron. In romantic period, they are John Keats, P.B. Shelley and Lord Byron are known as the poet of second generation or a second group or a young group, because there is also the first generation, and that is known as old generation or old group, that is William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge. We are studying John Keats' poetry, that's why we are specific toward his work. His work published only 4 years before his death. He died at the age of 25 from tuberculosis. During his lifetime, he has severely attacked by the critics, and it is said that because of critics' attacks, he lose his health and died. Think it is presented in P.B. Shelley's elegy that he is attacked by some critics and that's why he loses his health. But during his lifetime he is attacked by the critics, but in 19th century he became one of the most beloved of all poets. We will see the feature John Keats' poetry. If we think about the features, then we come to know that his style is heavily loaded with sensualities. In his every poem, it may be Nightingale, it may be Grecian, it may be Melancholy or other poems he has written. For example, in Nightingales, through the song of the bird, he has created a sensuousness in the reader. So sensuality is one of the great feature of John Keats' poetry. The second feature is he wrote most notably in the series of odes. All his poems are ode. There are some long poems also, but his greatest works are the odes. That's why there is also one phrase used for his poetry that published in a particular year, 1819, are known as the great odes. So why these are the great odes? Because in his life that year is more productive and he has created more mature and powerful poems in that 1890s, and these are the 5 poems. For example, Indolence, then Melancholy, then Grecian, then Nightingale, and one more. So these are his poems. These poems are known as the Great Odes of John Keats that published in 1890. Of odes is also one of his great features. He uses natural images to arise extreme emotions. All his poems, odes, as we have seen, are heavily loaded with sensuality. They arouse the extreme emotions through the reader because he has used such images, such objects in his poetry. For example, in Grecian urns, he has uses some pictures depicted on that pot and that he describes in this poem. That's why arise extreme emotions is also one of major feature of his writing. The next feature of his writing is pursuit of beauty. In his each and every poem, he tries to know the beauty. He wants to know the beauty, and according to him, understanding beauty allows one to become more acquainted with truth. He says that through the understanding of beauty, we can understand, we can know the truth. So, understanding beauty or pursuit of beauty is also one of the great features of his poetry. So there are some minor features. For example, he focuses on familiar things. For example, day to day natural objects he has used in his poetry, natural images he has used in poetry. For example, the bird nightingale is become one of the major objects or things or image in his poem. Again here a Grecianer, one of the tangible object become one of the there are so many what we can say abstract things also he has used. So he focuses on familiar things. Again, a removal of self. Actually, John Keats, a negative capability is a term used regarding his theory of poetry or his poem. So removal of self is also one of the great features in his poetry. In writing poetry, he remain a detached observer. He never involve himself in that. And last feature of his poetry is odal hymns. So all his poems are odes, and odes are songs. It is what we can say a prayer. So odal hymns is also one of the great feature. We are going to move towards the particular poem. The title of that poem is Ode on a Grecian Urn. This poem written in May 1890 and it published anonymously in Annals of the Fine Arts for 1890. This poem is also the part of the great odes. As I have explained you, this term great odes is used a particular poems that published in 1819 because it is said that critics said that these poems are his mature works, and that's why they have given a phrase to that year, that is a great odes. So great odes are indolence, melancholy, nightingale, psyche and Grecian. These are his great odes. He found existing form of poetry unsatisfied, so he moved to the ode form. So what is the existing form of poetry? For example, if we think about the neoclassical period, then in neoclassical period there is a satire. Satire was the most predominant form of the poetry in that era, and all the poet, it may be John Dryden, Alexander Pope or Dr. Johnson, all of them have used heroic couplet as a main, what we can say, metric forms of their poetry. They have a specific decorum, they have a specific meter, and they maintain throughout the poem. According to them, the diction of the poetry should be different. It should not be the language of day-to-day communication. Okay, so that was the notion of poetry in neoclassical period, and that notion of poetry, that satirical form of poetry, is not appropriate to the romantic poet to present their own feelings and emotions. That's why they attack the neoclassical notions of poetry, they revolt against it, and they have invented a new form, and that is the free play of the poem. They have started to use the ode, as ode is a, what we can say, a subjective poetry, subjective form of poetry, and through that they have presented their emotion. As we know, the publication of lyrical ballad in 1798 is the beginning of romantic period. And who is the father of romantic age? William Wordsworth is the father of romantic age, and he has given the definition of poetry. What is the poetry? According to him, poetry is an overflow of powerful feeling that recollected in tranquility. So, according to this definition, the existing form of poetry, means satire, is not appropriate for the poet John Keats, and that's why he moves towards the ode form and most of the poems. Now we come to know that who is John Keats, which period he belongs to, what are the features of his writing, and he moves towards the ode. So we should know what is an ode. Ode as other form of poetry, for example, lyric, ballad, satire, elegy, epic, ode, idyll. In that way, ode is also one form of poetry. It is a song sung by a band of people on a particular public events. It is lyrical in nature, means it is like a song, and it is not so lengthy like a epic, or not so short like a lyric, but it has a moderate length. What? Ode has a moderate length. The ode is not a kind of poem like a lyric one person can sing. It is not in that way. It has a choric in nature. It is a choric in nature, means there are chorus. One people is singing and other band of people, means a group of people, is supporting to that singer. So it is a choric in nature. It is a meditative form of poetry. What is meditative? Means it, what we can say, deeply think on a particular subject, on a particular, what we can say, object, on a particular image. For example, in this Grecian urn, poet is thinking, introspecting, what we can say, have a meditative information on the Greek era, on the life philosophy and what not. He has presented so many things. So meditative form of poetry is a ode. Poet means any poet who wrote ode poems praises people, or what we can say, nature or scenes or abstract ideas. For example, we think about P.B. Shelley's West Wind, ode on a west wind. So that is an abstract idea. He talk about the qualities of west wind. If we think about, what we can say, some scenes are also there presented in the ode, and natural objects, for example, nightingale, for example, skylark, for example, that Grecian urn. These are the odes, and there is also praise for the peoples. So in ode there is also, what we can, there is a praise for the people, nature, scenes or abstract ideas. The tone and subject matter of ode is always highly serious. Means the subject is serious. It is talking about the life philosophy. Every poem is presenting poet's own emotions, poet's own, what we can say, problem. So it has a serious subject, and ode has used elaborate pattern of stanza form. Means ode has its own in a particular, but there are three types of ode. One is Pindaric ode, second is Horatian ode, and third is irregular ode. So what is a Pindaric ode? Pindar, a Greek poet, wrote ode form. He wrote odes, and there are so many people after him following his form of poetry. So who are the followers of his form are known as the Pindaric ode. So what is there in a Pindaric ode? Pindaric ode, as we have seen ode, choric in nature, means there are a chorus. Pindaric ode is always sung at public events. Pindaric ode is divided into three stanza form, or what we can say, into three parts. For example, in Pindaric ode there is a strophe, there is an antistrophe, and then epode. So what is a strophe, antistrophe, and epode? These are the part of that, means that poem is divided into three parts. While means strophe is the beginning of the poem, and at that time the singers, they also dance. They dance from the left to the right in a strophe part. Second part is antistrophe part, and in that antistrophe part, these singers or a band of people, they moves while singing and dancing from the right to the left. And when there is a last part, that is epode, at that time they stand still into, what we can say, in between the public. So that is an epode. So this is a Pindaric ode, is an Horatian ode. So what is Horatian ode? Horace is also a poet. As Pindar is a Greek, Horace is a Latin poet. He wrote this form and make it popular in the literature, and the people who follows his form after his death are known as, means in that poetry, are known as Horatian ode. So what is Horatian ode? Horatian ode is informal and meditative in nature. Means it is not a formal, it is informal. Horatian ode is, the subject matter is simple and pleasing to the sense of the reader. So these are some features of the Horatian ode. Now last ode is irregular. Irregular ode is an ode developed by the British poet or English poet like Wordsworth, Keats, P.B. Shelley, and so on. They neither follow Pindar nor Horace. They have used common features from the both writing and invented their own form, is known as irregular ode. It does not follow any specific structure, which irregular ode does not follow any specific structure. The poet has great freedom and flexibility in, what we can say, irregular ode. We are going to move towards the summary of this poem. What is the summary of this poem? What is the poem? Poem is Ode on a Grecian urn. So look now here and be a concentrative. The poem has 5 stanzas, each with 10 lines. The poem at the very beginning addresses a classical Greek urn. What is urn? Urn means a pot. Urn means a pot, a big, what we can say in Marathi, bhand, kadhi. So urn is a pot. The poem describes and discurs images upon the urn. Means in this poem there are so many images depicted on the pot, and speaker of the poem, or what we can say a poet, is talking about philosophically that images, that pictures depicted on that pot. The technique of the poem is ekphrasis, the poetic representation of a painting or a sculpture in words. What is ekphrasis? Ekphrasis means it is one kind of a technique, it is one kind of a representation. What kind of representation? A painting or a sculpture in a word. That's why it is known as ekphrasis. So in this poem, poet used the technique of ekphrasis to present his ideas, because there is one pot, and on that pot there are so many pictures, and that pictures poet have described into the words in this poem. That's why this poem is in the technique of ekphrasis. Poet reflect upon two scenes in this poem. What are these two scenes? One, what we can say, a first scene is a lover pursues his beloved. Where he is in first three stanza. A lover pursues his beloved in first three stanza. What is the second scene? A priest gather to perform a sacrifice. A priest gather, or what we can say, bring an heifer to perform a sacrifice. So these two images, what we can say, these two scenes are depicted on that pot, and that two scene poet have described, developed in each and every stanza of this poem. The poet conclude the poem from the line. What is that line? Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. What poet is saying? Poet is presenting here what is an beauty, and you, reader as well as everyone, should know the beauty. If you know the beauty, you know the truth. On this earth, everyone should know only that thing. The poem was not well received by the critics, but in 19th century it began to be praised and now considered one of the greatest poem. This is what we can say, the introductory part of this poem. What we can say, a brief summary, not a summary, a brief introduction of this poem. Now in this slide we will start to the summary of the poem. Stanza first. In the stanza first, when we open, that time we come to know the speaker stand before urn and addresses it. Means urn means it is a pot, and poet is explaining the picture depicted, or what we can say, a painting presented on that pot. So in this poem there is one speaker. They stand in front of that pot, that bhanda, and he is explaining, he is addressing to that urn. He is addressing to that urn into the first stanza. What he called to that urn in the first stanza? Now see, he thought about frozen pictures. Frozen, what we can say, a freeze, what we can say, a static picture that cannot move from one place to another. So that is known as a frozen pictures depicted on it. Depicted means presented. painting on that pot. So that is a painting and that cannot move. That's why frozen pictures depicted on it. He addresses urn. What he called to urn? Addresses means he called. What he called to urn? As still and ravish bride of quietness. What is an urn? Still unravished bride of quietness. The foster child of silence and slow time. He called urn a historian that can tell a story. He called urn an historian that can tell a story. He looks other scenes on the urn and pose a question. What question he pose? He pose what legend they depict and from where they came. He looks the scene of group of men pursuing group of women and wonders what their story could be. What mad pursuit, what struggle to escape, what pipes and timbrels, what wild ecstasy. So these are the questions posed by the speaker in this stanza. See, in the first stanza, what we have seen that there is a speaker of this poem who stand in front of that pot. He looked the picture on that pot and he puzzled, what we can say, that pictures affected him, that picture impressed him, attracted him, and that's why what he called to that frozen picture. Actually these are the pictures that cannot move, so he called that frozen pictures still unravished bride of quietness. Means these pictures are very beautiful. It is like a bride, but we can say a calm bride. Again he said what he called again to that picture the foster child of silence and slow time. Foster child of silence and slow time means time cannot destroy that picture. Again he called a great historian. What is that pot? What is that urn? That urn is an historian, and that historian will tell us the story of Greek period. There are so many scenes on that pot, and when he observed, that speaker observed that scenes at that time, there are so many emotions and feelings in his mind, and he was deeply thinking about their life, and he is asking the question to himself. What kind of question he has asked? He asked the question to himself, what legend they depict? Means what these pictures are presenting, what kind of legends they are presenting here, what kind of story they are presenting here, and where they came from. Means that stories are from where, from which place in the Greek era. In that way he is asking. He again looks on the scene and says what kind of scenes. There are some group of men, and that group of men are running, rushing behind the group of women, and they are, what we can say, that men are trying to catch them, trying to catch all these women. So he looks that picture and he again asks so many questions to him. What are these questions? He said, what mad pursuit. Means how enthusiastic these men and women, they are playing in that picture. So what mad pursuit, what struggle to escape, how that women are struggling to escape from the hands of men. So he is asking the question to himself, what struggle to escape. There are some peoples who are playing the pipes and timbrels. That is a music, and that's why he is saying that what pipes and timbrels. And lastly, he asked the question, what wild ecstasy. Ecstasy means, what we can say, the highest happiness, what we can say, heavenly happiness. So what a happy picture, what a happy generation, what an happy people, men and women they are enjoying their life. So that is presented in this first stanza of the poem. Now we are moving towards the second stanza of the poem. So what is the second stanza? Second stanza is a little bit small stanza. In this stanza, speaker looks the picture of a young man, and that man playing a pipe. Pipe means one kind of a musical instrument, and he is playing that instrument, lying with his lover beneath the tree. Means there is one picture on that pot. What kind of picture that is? There is one tree, and under that tree there is one person, one man who is playing something, that musical instrument, and he was also sleeping there under the tree. With whom? With his beloved. So that kind of a picture there is. That is a second picture. On that urn, on that pot, speaker says that piper's unheard melodies are sweeter than mortal melodies because they are unaffected by the times. What kind of a philosophy that poet have presented in these lines. See, unheard melodies are sweeter than the heard. Melodies means the song presented by that picture is very beautiful. What we can say is a melodious than we have heard. Because heard melodies are always torturous. Heard melodies, heard songs are always giving us some kind of trouble. But these are the unheard melodies, and these unheard melodies are really sweeter. They never torture us, they never trouble us, they never arouses any, what we can say, bad feelings in us. And that's why he is saying that unheard melodies are sweeter than mortal melodies because they are unaffected by times. Time cannot stop them. See, in the last line he tells the youth that though the piper can never though the piper can never kiss his lover because he is frozen in time, he should not grieve because her beauty will never fade. Here also he has what we can say, expressing his own grief, his own sorrows. Who? Poet, because poet is afraid of his own health, poet is afraid of his own age. He is though 25 years old, but he was aware about his, what we can say, life. He saw the symptoms of the end of his life, and that's why he is presenting his sorrows through such a line. He says that on that picture, on that pot, the picture or that lover in that picture should not be worried. He cannot kiss his beloved. Why? Because it is a picture, it is not possible to them. But also he should not worry. Why? Because they will be like this forever, from ages and ages. They not need to worry about their own age, about their own beauty. Their beauty will be forever here. But he did not say it, but he is saying about himself that one day human beings have to die. There is, what we can say, time, and that time overcomes everything, but that time will not affected that picture. Now the fourth stanza of this poem. In this stanza we can see the another picture, the second scene that speaker or poet have presented in the poem. That scene is about the saint, or what we can say, the speaker examines the picture of group of villagers leading a heifer to sacrifice. He wonders where they are going and where they have come from. He imagines their little town empty of all citizens. It suggests that its streets will evermore be silent, for those who have left it frozen on the urn will never return. Means what poet have presented in this fourth stanza, we come to know that there are some group of people and they are leading to a what we can say heifer. Heifer means a one kind of animal to sacrifice him, and that's why they are leading, and that procession is going on. They are happily enjoying that procession, and they are leading that heifer to a particular god. And that's why by looking this scene, poet wonders and he thinks that what is this, where these people are came from and where they are going. And also imagine that these people are now all came from their came from out of their village, and that's why what will happen, their town may be empty now, because all the citizens are in whole in that procession, in that what we can say ceremony. And that's why all the streets in that village, or what we can say the town, are what we can say empty. And that village or that streets of the village will be empty forever, because it is what we can say a sin on that pot or on that urn. And that's why they will never return to their the last stanza of this poem, that is the fifth stanza. And in the fifth stanza we can see the speaker addresses the urn and says that, urn like eternity, do tease us out of thought. The speaker says that when his generation is long dead, the urn will remain, telling future generation the lessons. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. The speaker says that that is the only thing the urn knows, and the only thing it needs to know. So in the fifth stanza, poet think about the quality of that urn, and he says that what that urn is, that urn become eternal, and whatever depicted on that urn, that pictures also will become eternal, and no one will forget them. And he also says that that eternity will tease, will torture to all human beings, because every human have an ending. They, no one will remember that pictures will be remembered forever because of their depiction on that urn. Again he says that when his generation is long dead, means what happened, the generation of that pictures is already no more, that is died, but still the urn will remain, that urn will be there, and that urn will tell future generation what they will tell to the future generation, the beauty is truth and truth beauty. What he is saying, speaker is saying that beauty is always truth, and that truth we should know, and that urn knows only the truth, and he also knows that he needs to know only the truth. Now we will see the theme of the poem. The poem have so many themes, but we have seen two or three themes of this poem. The first theme of this poem is mortality. See, Ode on a Grecian Urn is a complex meditation on mortality. Death preoccupies the speaker, who responds by seeming to both celebrate and dread the fleeting nature of life. The scenes on the urn depict a classical world that has long since passed, and yet, in being fixed on the urn itself, these scenes also evoke a sense of immortality. The urn is therefore a contradiction. Its scenes speak of vibrant humanity, and because they are frozen in time, seems to represent a kind of eternal life. At the same time, everything and everyone in the urn's world is no more. See, both themes are presented here, mortality and immortality. How it is mortal? Because no one will last forever, everyone have an end, time will conquer us, we are not eternal. If there is a birth, then there is a death, and the speaker of this poem is afraid of that death, and he is thinking about his own death, and that's why he is expressing his sorrow or grief through this poem. Again he is saying that if you want to become immortal, if you want to become an immortal, if you want to remain in this world forever, then we have to do something that will read by others, continue for the future generation. And that's why he is thinking about his own writing, about his own poetry. He wants to make his poetry immortal for the future generation, and that's why there are both contradictory themes this poem present. One, if we think about the picture on that urn, that is depicted on that urn, are no more, but still that scenes that are frozen, and that frozen scenes will last forever. So they have dead, still the reader, the speaker, or anyone who is observing will remember the beauty of that scene. So in this poem, the theme of mortality and immortality is very important, that is presented, that is a predominant theme of this poem. The next theme of this poem is art, beauty, and truth, and that is presented in this poem. See, what is art? Ode on a Grecian urn examines the close relationship between art, beauty, and truth. For the speaker, it is through beauty that humankind comes closer to truth, and through art that human beings can attain this beauty. At its heart, the poem admits the mystery of existence, but argues that good art offers humankind an essential, if temporary, way of representing and sensing this mystery. The poem's famous ending is vital to understanding the speaker's position on art, beauty, and truth, and contextualizes the lines that have come before. The speaker's concluding sentiment, beauty is truth, truth beauty, demonstrates that in the context of this poem, beauty and art are one and the same. Thanks.